can get help, and to make sure that people who would like to volunteer in their community can help where they are most needed. If you need help, if you know someone who needs help, or if you'd like to offer help, please call 0818 222 024 or call your local authority community call helpline. All the details are live now at gov.ie. Supported by the Government of Ireland.
This isn't the time to be shy about striving for success. This is a time to act on ambition, to think bigger, go further, learn more. UCD is Ireland's #1 university for graduate employability, with master's degrees that open doors and mentors who will nurture, inspire and shape you professionally. Stand out on your own terms and set your own trajectory. Visit ucd.ie/masters. UCD. Think bigger.
The Saturday panel on Off the Ball.
Now you're very welcome back to Off the Ball Saturday on News Talk. John Duggan with you through to 5 o'clock. 53106 the number for your text messages. Also streaming live as well now, so you can get in touch with us on the Off the Ball social channels, on YouTube, on Facebook, on Twitter. @Off the Ball is our handle on Twitter. You can listen to us on the Go Loud app. So this is the Saturday panel, and the panel today is all about the making of a sports documentary. So why are we doing this? I suppose at the moment a lot of people are watching documentaries at home during the coronavirus pandemic, staying safe, locking down, and a lot of those are sports documentaries. We've had this Michael Jordan one coming out in the last week, The Last Dance. There's actually a weekly review of this on OTBAM with Owen Sheehan, Ronan Mullen, Kieran Donaghy and Jarlath Regan every Tuesday. This is about Michael Jordan's career with Chicago Bulls and his last season as well. And also on the subject of documentaries, great news during the week for everybody here. 2 of OTB's original series, The Classic, were recognised at the New York Radio Awards. So A New Dawn in Dublin by Owen Brennan and Ma'am, That's For You, the Ken Doherty story by Shane Hannon were both recognised as finalists. So congratulations to Shane and Owen. So to talk about, not just about what's your favourite sports documentary, but how it's made, the making of it, we're joined by 2 experts today. Ross Whitaker, who's the director of the recent Boys in Green, Katie, Open Shane Lowry, and When Ali Came to Ireland films, and Kevin Brannigan, director of Cares Kids and In League with Gaddafi. Ross, just start with you. How did you get involved in all of this? How did you become a sports documentary maker?
God, I mean, it started a long time ago, I suppose. Like a lot of people around my age, would have seen When Ali Came to Ireland. I would have seen A Year Till Sunday in the kind of mid to late 90s. And it just put sport in a completely different forum. You're watching sport in a feature-length documentary context. You were going deeper into the subject material. And it just felt like you could go deeper into it. And I was completely blown away by that, really, really excited by it. And I suppose that was where the seed came from. And then over the next 10 years, started just tinkering away at it and gradually getting some opportunities and taking it from there.
Yeah, I've just watched The Boys in Green, the 2-parter that you did on Jack Sears and Italia 90 and how it changed the country, Ross. And how long does it take to put that together? Is it a couple of years? How long does it take for you to work on something like that to get it to 2 hours of primetime national TV?
Yeah, you'd love to have 2 hours. I mean, 2 years to do 2 hours, but unfortunately you don't. It was the germination of it came from Loose Horse Productions, who would have done many famous Irish sports documentaries like Miko and John Giles and so many other ones. And they essentially hired me to do it. So when they came to me, I just thought it was an incredible area to be able to go into. Our first conversations were last July. It took a long time to figure out exactly what it was going to be. It started off as a documentary actually about the Lansdowne riots, because that anniversary was coming up and has now since passed in February. And then it just expanded from there. So it went from being a 1-parter to a 2-parter. At one stage, there was talk of trying to replay the game between England and Ireland that had been cancelled and get some of the older players back together. But I think we realised that would be difficult, but also that if you start using the context before the Lansdowne riot, you start looking at Jack's entire time in charge, and you realise that that's a fascinating time, and that's kind of where we ended up going. So started in July, August. I suppose the bones of it was really 4 or 5 months, from September through to February. So it was kind of foot to the floor for the whole thing. And you'd love to have more time. I mean, there's just so much archive we didn't even get to watch or touch on But at the same time, you can only do 2 hours. So, sometimes more archive can be a problem rather than something you necessarily want to go into when you've got a short period of time to do it.
So the mindset really then with the Boys in Green, you had an idea originally and then that changed given, actually, you know what, we're going to be able to speak to these people. We're going to take this in a different direction. So it's almost like a movie that sometimes you might have actors built for and then they're not working out. I remember, was it Francis Ford Coppola said that Harvey Keitel wasn't working out for Apocalypse Now, and then he brought Martin Sheen in. So it was a case that you were changing things as you went a bit.
I think you just, a big word for me with all of these projects is context, and you start realizing, and I've got 2 small kids, so I probably have seen less than a lot sports docs than a lot of people in the last couple of years. But I watched the O.J. Simpson series about a month ago, and it was just absolutely outstanding and astounding because it really told the story of the entire relationship between black and white people, and particularly between black people and the police in Los Angeles through, I suppose, a sports documentary originally for ESPN, I believe. And you just realize the context of stories is such a huge part of doing a great sports documentary. And I think when we started looking at Jack Charlton's time, you look at Ireland in the 80s, Ireland in the 90s, and how fascinating a time that is. And you just can't help yourself but realize that there's more there. And I think that's what happened with the Boys in Green. And the more we looked around, the more we felt was there, and the more interesting it became. And I suppose we and a lot of people wish we could have had more episodes in the end.
Yeah, Ross, and I think that's really important. I think context is really important when it comes to documentaries. And my favourite sports documentaries are all about maybe different things other than sports. So it's Once Brothers, it was war with Yugoslavia and basketball. If it was Hillsborough, it was the facts I learned, the new facts out of that really tough documentary that came out a few years ago from Daniel Gordon. If it's Senna, it's the film, the way you felt you were really there with Ayrton Senna when that was made by Asif Kapadia. We're now joined by Kevin Brannigan. And Kevin, how did you get into this? How did this work out for you that you ended up making Kerr's Kids in league with Gaddafi and that you're following this career path?
Hey lads, thanks for having me on the show. And just before I start, I suppose, compared to Ross, I would be a complete novice. So I've got a bit of imposter syndrome being on the same panel as him.
Don't worry.
But yeah, how did I get into it? I suppose I started off as a runner in the RT Sports Department during the Beijing Olympics. I remember going for an interview there and I didn't get it. And then they rang me up about a day or so before the Beijing Olympics and said a lad had broken his leg. So I was back in. And I kind of spent about a decade knocking around the RT Sports Department, eventually getting my dream job of making the intros to the Ireland soccer games. So basically, I was given a free rein by my editor at the time, Eugene O'Neill, to come up with, each of them had a little storyboard, and it allowed me to go into the RT archive and to mess around. And I kind of just started discovering, I don't know, like my skill, I suppose, of getting a particular piece of music, getting the archive, and then as Twitter and social media came along, where the RT would start putting these out on Twitter before the game, and you could see that people were really roused always by archive with a good track. So I spent a good few years doing that, and then I kind of just had the idea. I started reading that. The anniversary of Brian Kerr's Glorious Summers in 98, 99 was coming up, and started thinking, is anyone making something about it? No one seemed to be making something about it, so I decided I would, and that kind of lent myself into it. I also was very lucky to meet a really good producer around that time as well, Gary Lennon, and he was kind of my guide into that world, because I don't know if Ross would agree with this. At the beginning, it's I found it quite scary. You have to go and do pitches and meet people and put across your plan. And I suppose the main thing is to put it across without rambling, which I have a tendency to do. But I suppose, yeah, Kerr's Kids was the first in, and then when you do that, you've kind of got a bit of a bug then. And after that it was on to Gaddafi after that. But yeah, I suppose my in was making those intros for Ireland qualifier games on RTE.
So Ross, you said that with the Boys in Green you were asked to do it, but previous to that, say with Katie or Shane Lowry, is it the case that you've got to get funding? How difficult is that? Is it that you're in with the executives and you got to pitch it, and then you just got to get the funding signed off and you can't go over your budget? How does that part of it work out?
Well, one thing is that it gets a lot easier as time goes on, because you, as you have more work behind you, you can show that to people, or people are aware of it, and when you can open doors for you, so people start thinking, oh, well, that person's made something I'm aware of or I liked, and therefore maybe they can make a good documentary about this subject material that they're bringing to me. And the big thing is access. You know, I mean, it's so hard to get access to stories. People are generally reticent, particularly if it's a contemporaneous story. In case of Katie, it was just luck and timing and relationships. I'd met Katie before. I knew her manager very well, and it just happened. And then really, Katie has probably opened a lot of doors for me. With other sports people, when you approach them, they're aware of the project and they've seen it. I mean, that's a big thing. Have they actually seen your work? And if they have and they like it, then that can help a lot. And a lot of times you need that access before you can go to a funder, because you could have the greatest idea in the world. You know, I want to do a documentary about Cristiano Ronaldo or something, but it's not much use as an idea unless you can actually demonstrate to a funder that you are the one that has that special access and that special relationship. So the other side of it is when you go to a subject and you say, I want to do a documentary about you, they're thinking, where is this going to end up? You know, is this going to end up anywhere? So it can be quite a difficult chicken and egg situation at the beginning, but as you go along, I think, and you can show your track record and show your work, then it gets a lot easier, or a little bit easier. And then you just kind of hopefully take it from there.
So on that, establishing trust, say, for example, with Katie, Ross, did that take a long time? And was there times when you felt a little bit, am I being intrusive here, for example, when she is praying in the documentary? Did you ever feel uncomfortable? Or was it the case that you established trust beforehand, you made an agreement, you almost have an unspoken contract or unwritten contract, and then she says, okay, you can do whatever you want here? Or is it just a case of there are ground rules set?
Even if you have an unwritten contract or indeed a written contract, you're still renegotiating that always as you go along. That's just a natural human thing. People's feelings change as they go along. They change. With Katie, I think once she decides something in her life, she's very strong about sticking to her words. So, which is great. And she became quite used to me being around very quickly. When I'm doing those kinds of documentaries, I am genuinely like a fly in the wall, and you wouldn't notice I'm there half the time. So she got very used to me just being around. And then the other side of it is, does someone trust you? And in a way, your previous work can help in that regard as well, because they can see from your previous work that you didn't rip anyone off, or you didn't cross any lines, or they may know people that were involved in your previous work who can speak to that. And I think that can really help, you know, and some of it's just instinctive. People know when they can trust someone, or they feel they can trust someone, and it's a two-way relationship, because I need to be able to trust the subject that they're not going to run off halfway through the project and leave me with nothing.
53106 for your text messages. Any questions you might have, listeners out there, about how a sports documentary is made for Ross Whitaker and Kevin Brannigan? Kevin, I watched the In League with Gaddafi this morning. It's brilliant because it's so original about the relationship there was between the Irish government and Libya regarding beef exports in the 1980s, and that Brian Kerr organised League of Ireland players and Bohemians in St. Pat's to play in Libya in 1989, and the Libyans thought, some of them in Benghazi, that they were actually the Irish team. It's a fascinating story. Putting that together, tracking people down, obviously with some of the Irish players, that if you got their trust and engagement, as Ross is saying there, with the likes of Pat Fenlon or Brian Kerr, it's straightforward enough. But the Libyan aspect of it, how tricky was that?
I suppose the Irish aspect would have been trickier if I hadn't have done Kerr's Kids. And I suppose that's what Ross is saying, in that, like, you build up a track record and prove to people that you're honest, and you can show things in an honest manner, or in a manner that you see as honest. And I suppose I had Brian's trust after the previous summer of doing Kerr's Kids with him. So it was easy to pitch it in a way, because Brian was on board from the get-go. For instance, I'm trying to pitch a documentary at the minute, and the guy isn't on board.
Okay.
But the people who I pitch it to are very into it, but it's just the subject matter isn't on board. So, you know, who knows how that will go. But in terms of the documentary originally started with, we were going to bring Brian to Libya. He was going to go to Benghazi. He was going to see the city as it is now after, you know, NATO had and the revolution there, etc. and he's going to go to a match. That Al Ali happened to be in the African Champions League that season, etc. So we could have went outside, but as you've seen last summer, the civil war in Libya really increased in intensity again, and the country seems to be partitioned at the minute. So bringing Brian to a war zone didn't work out in the end, though that would be a great documentary, especially if we were kidnapped or something like that.
Well, maybe not.
I don't know. Kidnap with Brian Kerr would be quite good. The anecdotes, but yeah, in terms of we got two players. Captain Ali was one of them, as you would have seen in the doc this morning. We got two players who had played in that game in Libya, and that was quite hard. We had to basically get onto numerous fixers, and eventually one of them was able to come through with the goods, track the lads down, interview them, and get the shots back to us here in Ireland. And when the shots came back, they seemed like two lads who were dressed casually, living a normal life and laughing and chatting about things. So I suppose when we project and think that everywhere outside, across the border is a war zone, people are also getting on with their daily lives. So that was quite heartening to see from the film as well. But it was hard, but it wasn't as hard as going there, I suppose.
Yeah, Ross, when I'm thinking about The Boys in Green and watching it, and I was kind of marvelled that you got Gary Lineker, for example, and Steve Staunton I haven't seen for a while being interviewed, and everybody seemed to be engaged. And when you're piecing together the interviews, the footage from the time, the music that you have to pick carefully, how long does it take, like the editing process, how much is left on the cutting room floor? How much do you end up keeping? Is it a case of, I'd love to have kept that, but I've just got to squeeze it down to the time I have?
Yeah, I'm going to have to say a very quick hello to my 4-year-old Rory if we don't want him to appear in the back of the shot here. So I'm going to get that out of the way. I always find that probably the thing you think you're going to keep the most, you often lose. And there was a couple of lines in the interviews, particularly from John Aldridge, where you just thought, wow, that line is going to be in this documentary no matter what. And then you find, because it's sometimes so strange or outstanding or unusual, you can't find a place for it. We had another scene in The Boys in Green all about the Harry Ramsden challenge, which we had a lot of fun with chips and all sorts of things that we ended up leaving out. So, yeah, you often do leave stuff out. I mean, what happens with the players in those situations is, and I learned this quite a lot when I was doing the Anthony Foley documentary with Access, is that sometimes Access doesn't come fast, but it does come in the end. And if you just keep trying and keep indicating to people how the project's going and keep saying, we've now interviewed this person and that person, and sometimes word gets around, yeah, those guys are okay, because you'd be amazed how much like former players talk to each other, say the Munster players of yore or the former Irish team. They're getting together, they're playing golf, funnily enough, a lot, and those kinds of things. And sometimes word gets around, like these people know what they're talking about it, they're taking an intelligent approach. So that can really help in terms of getting the names. And then the editing side of it, well, you're always up against the clock. And people say you never really finish a documentary, you just kind of run out of time. And that's definitely the case with The Boys in Green. The one good thing that happened with The Boys in Green was that the election fell the weekend when it was originally supposed to be broadcast, and we ended up with 2 or 3 extra weeks to edit, and the project improved so much in that couple of weeks. So editing is probably the toughest part and the most enjoyable at times.
53106 for your text messages to Ross Whitaker and Kevin Brannigan about the making of a sports documentary. Absolutely love the Katie documentary, a very sympathetic portrayal of a very impressive person. That is from Martin. Senna was for me the best, not only sports documentary, but documentary movie. It's simply brilliant. It's like you're in the cockpit in the driving scenes. Quite a perfect piece of work, and very sad, of course, as well. That is from Derek in Cork. Kevin, do you get obsessed about this when you're in the editing process and you're reviewing it constantly and you think you've watched this 1,000 times, and is it almost like you've got to put a second pair of eyes across it to say, I'm actually too close to this now, when you're putting together, say, the end part of Kerr's Kids or In League with Gaddafi?
I suppose the one that's most fresh in my mind is In League with Gaddafi from last summer, and I worked with an amazing editor, Cara Holmes. I suppose sports fans might know her from doing Jump Girls on TG Carter a couple of years ago. And Cara would admit herself that she's not League of Ireland obsessive like I am. So she was able to come at it with a more of a fresh set of eyes than I am. But I really enjoy the editing process. I really enjoy going down a rabbit hole. And In League with Gaddafi, there was many rabbit holes to go down. There was recession in Ireland. There was arms coming in from Libya for the IRA. There was the beef going the other way. There was Charlie Haughey, and I was reading a lot of books written about Charlie Haughey, and just like really immersing myself in that world. And then does that come out on screen? I suppose it does, but it doesn't. You've spent a good guts of a year reading every book about the provisional IRA of that period and Charlie Haughey of that period, and it doesn't necessarily then make it into 60 minutes of the film, because the film is essentially about a group of working class lads from Dublin who go on this wild adventure and come home and have a story to tell in the pub for the next couple of decades. But that's what I find the most fun, that you're able to go down these rabbit holes and totally immerse yourself and learn all this new stuff. And I find it a real downer, or I did find it a real downer when Illegal Gaddafi was done for about 2 or 3 months afterwards, that I didn't have a project to immerse myself in. I suppose thankfully on the last week of the edit, myself and my partner had a child, so I suppose that was a big enough project after that. But the editing process and the scripting process is I think really good fun. And as Ross says, it starts off one way and then it totally veers another way. And there's days when you'll watch it and you'll think it's the best thing ever. You'll go home, sleep on it, and then you come in and see it the next day, and it's not the best thing ever. And it's just having that motivation to keep going with it again. But deadlines are good, yeah. Well,
congratulations on the birthday of your child, Kevin. Ross, I'm just thinking of this, and it sounds like a bit of a drug. It sounds like you're trying to peak for this to get this perfect. I know I wrote a book a few years ago, and it was, I remember I read it the night before, and I had 13 mistakes in it, and I was just going through up the walls, and because once it's sent away, you can't get it back. Production staff, like researchers, technical people, editors, how many people work on a sports documentary?
Well, it really depends, but often the team is quite small because the budgets for documentaries are not huge, you know what I mean? And no one's making a fortune, and certainly not in Ireland, making documentaries. So often you'll have a producer, a researcher, and a director as the core team, sometimes an exec producer. We had Cormac Hargadon on The Boys in Green, who's like hugely experienced and successful director in his own right. So, but you largely never have more than 3 or 4. But I suppose, kind of as Kevin says, you become obsessed with the subject, and maybe each of you becomes interested in different portions of it sometimes, and you can bounce that off each other. And it's always great when someone in your team says, have you ever thought about this, or did you hear about that, or I once heard this story, and it can create the start of a thought process to go down one of the rabbit holes that Kevin mentions, and you find something different. And I suppose one of the things that you're looking for is something different, particularly for a well-worn story like The Boys in Green. Like there's several types of stories, but one is the well-worn story that you're revisiting with a big time gap that allows you to kind of look at it again in a cultural context. Like that's what ESPN do a lot. They only do stories from 20 years or more in the past because they want to know about the socio-cultural impact of that. So, and then there's the ones where they're unknown stories, like in League with Gaddafi, where you're revealing something new to people. So either way, there's discovery, and there'll always be people within your team that are discovering slightly different things to you or hearing things through the grapevine that can be interesting to look at.
Yeah, and League with Gaddafi, it's funny that did you get a sense that everybody was just Kevin on side and like enjoyed going back in 30 years in time, and that they actually got a bit of camaraderie around the fact that they could share their memories, and they might have not have seen their former teammates that often?
Yeah, like these are players who would be different to John Aldridge and Ronnie Whelan in that they're not being interviewed a lot, and that they're not having to recall memories a lot to camera or on the radio. And I think they had a lot of joy in the fact that someone was actually taking interest in going and chatting to them about their lives and their careers and this time. The thing I found most interesting was everyone told the same story but in a different way, and a lot of spice was added into some people's stories. And it was just funny the way that memory works. I think one of our interviewees was adamant that Gaddafi had been at the match and he'd met Gaddafi and, chatted, or Gaddafi had not chatted to him, but he had chatted to Gaddafi. That just happened not to be true, but the way he had spun it in his mind over the last 30 years, it had become true. So I suppose maybe it made me look back on tribunals with a bit less of a harsh eye when I'm thinking, yeah, maybe these lads didn't actually remember what bank accounts they had, because stuff that happens 30 years ago, even if it's a big moment of going to Libya and playing in front of Gaddafi or whatever, you don't always just retain the memory. But just on terms of production crews and stuff like that, I was up late last night and I was looking back through some sports documentaries that I really loved over the years and loved watching growing up. And I suppose the one that came up for me was 1 Year Till Sunday, and that was Pat Comer just doing it with basically a handy cam until it reaches the end and gets a bit more into it. And then one of the best fly in the wall, if not the best fly in the wall, documentary, Club for a Fiver, about that season with Leyton Orient. That started off with Jo Tiranen, I think her name was, and she was just a local film student who was a Leyton Orient fan and asked could she just hang around and film that season as part of a project. So you don't always need the big, like I was also watching the Rodman documentary earlier this week after I'd watched the Last Dance. I'm watching Rodman on ESPN, and it's huge and it's this big production, and he's been interviewed in a concert hall and stuff like that, and it looks great and it's a great story, but it doesn't always need to be 50 people. Some of the best ones are done with just one person with a camera.
We're talking to Kevin Brannigan and Ross Whitaker here today on Off the Ball Saturday on the Saturday panel about the making of a sports documentary. 53106 for your text messages. We're going to take a news break now and we'll come back to you in a moment. I suppose the reason why we're doing this, a lot of people at home are cocooning. If you're over 70, and there's also people dealing with the lockdown. It's difficult during the coronavirus pandemic, and sometimes a sports documentary can be a good window to pass the time. And obviously the Michael Jordan one is out now, The Last Dance, about his seasons with the Chicago Bulls, and we're reviewing that every Tuesday on OTB AM. And also on the subject of sports documentaries, two of OTB's original series, The Classic, were recognised at the New York Radio Awards this week. A New Dawn in Dublin by Owen Brennan, and Ma'am, That's For You, the Ken Doherty story by Shane Hannon. So great week for them in sports documentaries. So 53106, any questions about the making of a sports documentary and your favourite sports documentaries? We'll be speaking to Ross Whitaker and Kevin Brannigan after the news.
The Saturday panel on Off the Ball.
There's never been a better time to get Air's totally unlimited broadband for just $29.99 a month for 12 months. Sign up today and you'll also get thousands of movies, TV series and amazing Amazon originals on Amazon Prime Video. On us for a whole year. For more on this amazing offer, call 1-800-500-300 or visit air.ie. Air. Let's make possible. Price for new customers. 12-month contract subject to availability. Bundle activation fee may apply. Full details and terms see air.ie/Prime Video.
These days, we all need our euro to go as far as possible. With Everyday Savers from Dunnes Stores, we've got hundreds of everyday products, many for €1 or less. So whether you're cooking more at home or catching up on some cleaning, we've got everything you need. And we've extended our 10 off 50 grocery voucher from 10 to 21 days. So your euro goes further each time you shop. Dunnes Stores. Always here for our customers, always better value. Terms and conditions apply, minimum spend required.
COVID-19 is a major public health emergency here in Ireland and around the world. It's having a big impact on our communities and on our businesses. Businesses of all shapes and sizes, in every sector, in every county, and in every part of our economy, are suffering the effects of the crisis. National and local government and all relevant state agencies are working together to help Ireland's business community get through this emergency. A major new package of supports is now available that includes help with cash flow, help for our small and medium-sized businesses, and help for businesses to plan for the long term. You can call your local enterprise office or go online to gov.ie to find out about the tailored business supports for individual sectors. For all information on how Ireland is responding to the COVID-19 emergency, visit gov.ie. Supported by the Government of Ireland.
Hope has never been more important or more fragile. Hope for a brighter future for all of us after COVID-19. It's the same kind of hope that Pieta gives thousands of people in suicidal crisis every year. But with this May's Darkness into Light walks postponed, Pieta urgently needs your support to continue saving lives. So please, donate to the Darkness into Light Sunrise Appeal now. And from your homes, join Electric Ireland and Pieta at sunrise on May 9th. Because during the darkest times, we're brighter together. Join us and donate at darknessintolight.ie. Proudly supported by Electric Ireland.
You work from home in your wedding gear, exercised in your Deb's dress, and held video calls like you were off to the ball. Formal Friday was the best fun. And you raise loads of money for our frontline workers. So thank you for your amazing support. But it doesn't stop there. We're still accepting donations, so please continue to support Formal Friday every week and dress up to the nines to support the front line. Donate what you can at formalfriday.ie. And thank you.
At Guaranteed Irish, we believe enterprise is at the heart of thriving communities.
Like Pat the Baker, whose staff are delivering freshly baked bread daily across the country. Now is the time to support Irish businesses who work tirelessly and safely to ensure the nation is nourished, while we stay safe at home. Guaranteed Irish welcomes companies that are altogether better choices for our communities, so look out for it. Thank you to all the team at Pat the Baker for continuing to stock the shelves. GuaranteedIrish.ie. Altogether better.
From true crime believers to science and business achievers, sports, arts and comedy, to the latest entertainment wannabe. Get political, get healthy, get educated. Get all your favourite podcasts on Go Loud. Download the Go Loud app now or add us on your smart speaker. Go Loud. Podcasts, radio and music to your ears.
On 106 to 108 FM, on newstalk.com, on smart speaker, and on the Newstalk app. This is Newstalk.
It's 2 o'clock, I'm Stephen Murphy. Gardaí and health officials are urging people to stick with the COVID-19 restrictions this weekend. The Chief Medical Officer says compliance over the next 10 days is crucial to control the virus. The death toll in the Republic has risen to over 1,000, including 5 healthcare workers who've lost their lives. 733 people are currently being treated in hospital, with 118 in intensive care. The HSE's Dr. Sarah Doyle says people should continue following the guidelines.
What we've done so far in Ireland, and everybody has been party to it, has been difficult, but it has been effective. We can see that, albeit acknowledging the 1,000 people who have died and their families and the loss for them. But it would have been much, much greater. There's no doubt about that.
The Department of Education is being criticised for a lack of clarity on junior cert exams. Tests could now take place as early as next month, despite original plans to hold them in September. Labour Party education spokesperson Aodhán Ó Ríordáin is calling on the Minister to address the situation.
If the Department is changing its policy around this so frequently and yet not coming out up front and being honest about it, then it leaves a lot of schools second guessing, will there be another change in policy next week?
A former Lord Mayor of Dublin has been questioned by Gardaí investigating a suspected lock-in last Friday. Neil Ring was found with 4 other men in an upstairs area of the Ref pub in Ballybock. Mr Ring says he was with business associates in his office drinking alcohol that didn't come from the pub downstairs. The Dublin City Councillor claims they were maintaining the correct social distance and that COVID-19 regulations were not broken. Gardaí are investigating after the discovery of more than €1.2 million worth of cannabis in County Laois. The drugs were found in a ditch on a secondary road near the Carlow-Laois border last night. No arrests have been made at this stage. And Facebook has expanded its live video service to meet the growing demand during the coronavirus lockdown. They've launched Messenger Rooms, which will soon be able to hold up to 50 people and can be accessed even if you don't have an account. It's 2:02.
Newstalk weather.
Thanks to the AA. To help in these challenging times, we've reduced the cost of our car insurance. Get our lowest price at the AA.ie.
Some showers in Munster, South Leinster and Connacht this evening, but staying dry everywhere else. Highest temperatures 16 to 20 degrees. And now you're up to date on Newstalk.
Off the ball. This is Newstalk.
This is Off the Ball Saturday on Newstalk with John Duggan until 5 o'clock. You can text us on 53106. This week's Saturday panel, all about the making of a sports documentary. Our guests are Ross Whitaker, the director of the recent Boys in Green, Shane Lowry Open, When Ali Came to Ireland and Katie, and Kevin Brannigan, director of Cares Kids and in league with Gaddafi. A good text in here on 53106, lads. Can you ask the lads who or what their dream subject would be to create a documentary about? That is from Sean in Cork.
Dream subject to create a documentary about?
Yeah.
I suppose the one I'm trying to do at the minute. I think my favourite documentaries are the ones that seem to happen by mistake. So as I was saying, Pat Coomer's A Year Till Sunday the documentary about Leyton Orient. Yeah, my favourite documentaries are fly in the wall ones. So in with a football club or in with a boxer like Ross has been, and following someone on their journey.
Pat Comer there, what was so special about that for you, Ross? And is there anybody that you haven't done a documentary about that you'd like to?
Like Kevin, I don't want to give away any secrets.
Sorry, Sean and Cork.
Yeah, because Kevin will just taste them. No, I mean, I'd actually love to do it on Arsene Wenger. I mean, I think what he did to English football and the person that he was, I think that's a really interesting subject. I might be giving Dave O'Leary a call one of these days. But I mean, Pat Comer's Year Till Sunday, there was just something about it. It was so different to everything else that was around at the time. It was just so immediate. And that kind of access, I mean, dressing room access is a really tricky thing to get. It's easier kind of in an individual sport like boxing, I think, because there's fewer people there, particularly in Katie's dressing room. There's only ever 2 or 3 people in the dressing room, or there was when I started. Now there's a few more camera people all the time, and she's used to it. But getting that kind of access to a football dressing room or a big sports dressing room would be amazing. Maradona would obviously have been an incredible one to do, just the genius that he was, and the life that he had, and the story in Naples. Other ones like Tyson, I mean, that was an incredible documentary, another incredible portrait Senna. I mean, those kind of films where the arena that you're in is so big. It's not just that the person's interesting, but the arena. And I think that's something that's really in my mind at the moment is how do you get to make films where the arena is world level and it's the biggest possible events, but the stories are still there and interesting. And I suppose that's something that I'm kind of trying to shoot for a bit at the moment.
Yeah, when I was thinking about Maradona, is the insight into the obsessive fame of Naples and the religious zeal that people had in Naples about Maradona, and the way there was almost a fly on the wall when he's in that kind of car journey. And if it's about catching hell about Steve Bartman, that guy who caught the ball that he shouldn't have, and the Chicago Cubs didn't win the World Series, and then the ugly side of human nature about that, or if it's Fire in Babylon, it's about the cultural reaction of the West Indies cricketers to the English, or if it's about the two Escobars, it's about Colombian society, how it can allow Pablo Escobar to thrive in the first place, and then for football to be almost like a tool of legitimacy for him, and then for Andres Escobar to get caught up in that. And it's the societal things that I find fascinating. And guys, when you talk about standard bearers for sports documentaries, what would be the standard bearers in your view?
Well, I think Asif Kapadia has obviously set a whole new standard. Dan Gordon is unbelievable. 9.79, what he created in that film from reasonably limited amount of footage, actually. You know, you've got a 10-second race about the Seoul 100-meter final. And yes, you seem to spend so much time in the stadium and looking at that track, and yet it never jars. You know, there's plenty of really good sports documentary makers. And to me, what's really interesting is the different types of stories you can tell as well, and different people do them well. And Asif obviously does that kind of first-person portrait of someone from the past, discovers incredible archive, which is really important, obviously, when you can come across an archive that hasn't been tapped or people have forgotten about. You've got the contemporary stories, those fly-in-the-wall ones. If you can get access to the Irish rugby dressing room like they did to a certain extent on RT a few years ago, and you've got Paul O'Connell doing that incredible speech, that's huge, hard to get. And then the other one is those stories from the past where you have extraordinary storyteller, extraordinary life, and the archive available to you. So, yeah, there's so many sports. It's funny, when you put this on Twitter last night, people were tweeting their favorite sports documentaries. I'd only seen about half of them. There's so many, and sport is just an area that just keeps giving in terms of stories, almost more than anything else.
If I could just ask Ross a question.
Yeah.
Ross, given how popular Maradona was last year when it came out, and Senna and Amy, and the fact that Asif just used archive, were you tempted maybe to go down that route with You Boys in Green? I was thinking maybe that could have been something you could have done, and just plaster it with archive and the voices the same way he had done it.
Yeah, well, it's two sides. Well, first of all, I quite like seeing people, actually, and I wouldn't want to just do it because he did it even as successful and as great as those documentaries were. But one thing I learned in making it, and if you had a lot more time, was that there is incredible archive there that we didn't even get a chance to look at. I mean, we found there's tons in the, Kev would know from working in there, like there's tons even just in the RT archive, but Windmill were following the Irish team for 4 or 5 years with 2 film cameras, and we only had the tip of the iceberg on that. And so on and so forth. Treasure, another production company, had done stuff towards the end, and we got to use a little bit of that. But the other side of archive is cost, and as soon as you move outside of the RT archive, when you're making something for RT, if you're using games from the World Cup or the European Championships or whatever it is, that's footage costs a fortune. I mean, thousands of euro per minute. So you have to limit it, and you have to limit it to those most important moments. And one thing I've learned, I think, from the last couple of docs, Shane Lowry and Boys in Green, is that you go to the moments, those archive moments, when most is at stake. And that's when people want to be there. They don't want to rewatch football games in entirety. They don't want to see Shane hit 65 shots around the golf course. What they want to be there is there for that moment, and for you to tee them up so that the archive really counts when you go there.
This is a text in here on 53106, lads. When We Were Kings, documentary about the Rumble in the Jungle. Ali Foreman sending not far behind. That is from John and Killarney. Yeah, When We Were Kings, it was fascinating because it won the Oscar, and the humour of Ali's press conferences, the way he unsettled opponents before fights, and the once again, the extent of the footage they had before those fights that Ali was boxing in. The one against Foreman, of course, was in Zaire at the time. This is from Neil. Which one of you is going to do the Saipan documentary?
We could do it together.
Yeah, no problem. You could get a couple of parts out of that, that's for sure. I mean, there have been some documentaries done on that. I have been wondering myself, does it require a revisit? And then you look at Mick's career, as an individual, as a man, as someone whose tenures as an Irish manager have come to an end both times in less than ideal circumstances, and yet deserves everyone's respect. I'm sure there's a few out there who don't feel that way, but there's so much from around then, and there were cameras there. I mean, I believe a friend of mine was supposed to be in Saipan filming, and for some reason towards the last minute they were told they weren't going, so there must have been some rumblings before it, but I know there is some footage, but not a huge amount from Saipan.
I suppose if you're looking at Michael Jordan and it being a 10-parter, if there was to be an Irish documentary that was a 10-parter, Saipan would be the one that you could get 10 parts out of, I imagine.
Yeah, Saipan's still big, lads. I find that it was a major story, like a major story. I remember being 23 at the time, working in radio at the time, a young lad and wet behind the ears, and it was really big. It was a really big story. I still think there's definitely other ways you can tell the story, and I think one thing about Saipan that I don't think people ever talk about, Saipan was meant to be an or situation for the players and the squad, but sure, we can talk about that again till the cows come home. What am I doing here? I'm trying to get into segues about Saipan here on a Saturday panel about the making of a sports documentary. The pressure, lads, the nerves, when this is going off, as I said earlier on, when this is going off to be, it's out of your hands. Are you having sleepless nights? What's it like when your baby is now being delivered?
Yeah, it's frightening. I think I often don't watch them actually when they go out on television, and just kind of avoid it, and then ask someone afterwards, was Twitter nice to us, but it's really hard, and one of the great things about Twitter is you do get instant feedback, and sometimes you get great pieces of criticism from it as well, that you take on the chin. It's a frightening thing, and it's also frightening because, particularly when you're doing something about a specific person like Shane Lowry, or in the case of Katie, that you're really concerned about how they and their families are going to receive it. I was really nervous about Shane for some reason. But thankfully, usually your nerves aren't required, and people do tend to respond pretty well to them, I think.
Yeah, I was really nervous about Brian for the 2 documentaries. He never got on to me to say that they were good in any way or anything like that, but I think he thinks they did. But I was really nervous, and then I also found out quite a lot about myself in that, like, I don't have a thick skin. After In League with Gaddafi went out, thankfully that evening my phone died, and I was watching it down in a pub in Fisborough, and thankfully my phone died, so I was able to watch it with my friends without checking Twitter every couple of seconds. But the next day when I had my phone turned on, I was going through the tweets, blah blah blah, and then one guy had tweeted that he wasn't into the music and or into the soundtrack, and then off the back of this tweet my whole world collapsed. until my girlfriend Dorina told me to cop on. But you kind of learn a bit about yourself, being like, wow. Imagine if you were on the receiving end of Twitter criticism about your work or about your personality or about yourself every day of the week, as a footballer or as an actor or someone who's out there or as a politician. It mustn't be a great place to be.
Yeah, that's definitely something.
You definitely remember the bad tweet, the one, the one.
I can actually still see the avatar of the guy who tweeted it. I can still see it in my head.
That was shite.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Are you, excuse the language, are you prepared to show something in a bad light if that's actually what you uncover through the filming? Is there a danger in getting too close to a subject because you get the access?
If I could hop in on that one. My first documentary I made wasn't sports related. It was about a guy called Sean Garland. And if you're a history politics person, you'd know that Sean passed away about 2 years ago, but he was a founder member of the Workers' Party, who were quite big here in the 80s. They were connected to paramilitarism. They also got quite a lot of people elected to the Dáil and to Europe in the latter half of the 80s. But I'd been asking Sean, I'd kind of become, again, obsessed with him after reading a book called The Lost Revolution. And I was asking Sean, would he do a documentary? Would he be on camera? Blah, blah, blah. And eventually he agreed to it after a lot of pestering. So myself and another guy, Graham Seeley, went and we did about 10 interviews with Sean and then compiled them down into a doc, which we showed at the Galway Film Festival. Now when I look back on that documentary, I could see that I got way too close with Sean, and Sean actually, by osmosis, became the director nearly. And I definitely didn't put in, some of the more darker stuff that I could have put in. And I feel like I learned a lot from doing that and from that happening. You can definitely get too close to people and then not want to show them, not show them in a completely honest and true sense.
Would that be your experience as well, Ross?
Yeah, I haven't really been in a situation where I felt like the main subject of the documentary, that there was a requirement to say something bad about them or whatever it might be. And I think you just try to be respectful of the fact that people have given you their time and all those kinds of things. But if there's something there that needs to be revealed, if something changes in the nature of production, of course you'll go with that. I mean, that's really important. I think you just are always weighing it up, and sometimes you can have a tendency, or people can have a tendency to kind of jump in on the most negative thing, or just the thing that might seem salacious, and I think it's always important to weigh up the story that you're telling, the through line of the story that you're telling, and whether or not that's relevant, or whether or not the audience learns something new through that, or are you just doing it, for the headlines or for the bit of excitement or the water cooler moment. So you have to weigh all those things up, I suppose. But it all comes back very clearly to me to, like, what is the story you're telling? What's the through line of it? And is this particular thing relevant to this person's point of view? You can be telling the story from a particular person's point of view, and then you're kind of in that position. You don't always want to skew from the point of view that you've taken.
How emotional was it, Ross, doing Axel?
Oh, I mean, I find a lot of them emotional. I mean, the interviews were just heartbreaking, and he's surrounded by so many people that love him and was such a wonderful character and loved character, that you're going into all of those interviews with your stomach in a knot, really, and you're coming out worse, So it was very, very tough. And it was very tough on the people who were doing the interviews. And in fairness to them, they're a very courageous bunch of people to be able to sit down and talk about it and feel that was necessary. And it was tough, I think, for people. And it was tough for people sometimes because of the moment that it happened and the moment in the relationship that they were in with Anthony at the time and so on. So it's very complicated when someone leaves so suddenly. And that certainly was one that stands apart. I mean, another one I did was called Unbreakable, where I followed a friend of mine, Mark Pollock, for 6 years who had a terrible accident. And I used to cry in the edit, just because you go over these moments again and again, you go over these interviews again and again. It's not like you only watch it once like the audience do. You can watch these interviews 10 or 20 times, elements of them. You can watch scenes even more than that, and there's particular moments that just can get you every time. So it can be emotional, yeah.
Got about 2 minutes left, lads. You've been brilliant to come on. Ross Whitaker and Kevin Brannigan, thanks so much today. 53106, great sports doc, the 4-year plan about Flavio Briatore taking over QPR. Can't believe the footage they released. That is from Mark. Lads, just to finish quickly, making a documentary, making a sports documentary seems like an absolute bug. Once you get a taste for it, you want to go back and you want to do another one.
Yeah, 100%.
Go ahead, Kevin.
Yeah, 100%. Like once in League with Gaddafi finished, as I said, I went down into a massive hole, and I was like, will I ever make another one again? Will people think that was good? When can I make another one again? How can I make another one again? It's a total bug. Just to be able to immerse yourself in one subject and follow it through to the end for over a series of months.
Making them is the best bit. You know, the hardest bit is actually getting them started. That's once you're in the process of making them, then it's a joy, and you feel sometimes. I mean, we were in the edit for Boys in Green with John Murphy and I in particular, one of the editors, and we were just saying like, oh, what a job, you know, how lucky are we to be doing this and to be watching this footage and be able to tell this story. So when you're in the process of doing it, it's great. It's a great thing to be doing. The tricky bits are the in-betweens, and sometimes you can have some pretty lean periods, or you can have periods where you're trying to persuade people to do the documentary and so on, and it can be quite hard going. But overall, it's probably up there as a great job to be doing when you're doing it.
Lads, I can't wait to see your next project. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
So Kevin Brannigan and Ross Whitaker there on the making of a sports documentary. Check it out on our podcast network later on. 53106 for your text. This is Off the Ball Saturday on News Talk.
Off the Ball on News Talk. Screen Time with John Farty.
This week on Screen Time, I talked to Ricky Gervais about the new series of Afterlife, the Golden Globes, and not drinking in the afternoon.
No, I don't drink in the day. Not yet.
Yeah,
but
well,
who's just one day?
yeah, give it time. Plus,